The great hall of the Shadow Moon Pact territory had never been so crowded. Every wolf for miles around had been summoned to witness what Alpha Marcus called a necessary demonstration of justice, though Lyra knew better as she knelt on the cold stone floor with her wrists bound behind her back. She had learned long ago that justice and cruelty often wore the same face in this place, and today would be no exception. The rope bit into her skin as two enforcers held her shoulders down, ensuring she remained in the humiliating position of submission that Marcus demanded. Around her, pack members whispered and pointed, their eyes filled with the same contempt she had endured for 23 years. The wolfless girl, the broken one, the shame of Shadow Moon. She had heard every insult, weathered every casual cruelty, and somehow survived in a world that measured worth by strength she did not possess. But today was different. Today, Alpha King Darius himself had arrived for what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic visit, an inspection of the territories under his domain, and Marcus had decided to make an example of her in front of the most powerful wolf in all the kingdoms. Lyra did not know exactly what crimes Marcus planned to accuse her of, only that she would be blamed for something, because that was how it always worked. When supplies went missing, when accounts did not balance, when anything went wrong in Shadow Moon territory, it was always the wolfless girl who took the punishment. She had no voice in the pack bond to defend herself, no family to speak for her, no status that might shield her from whatever Marcus decided she deserved. Her parents had died when she was 5, killed in a rogue attack that she barely survived, and the pack had raised her in the most minimal sense of the word, giving her just enough to keep her alive so she could serve them. The massive oak doors at the far end of the hall opened, and the crowd fell silent as the Alpha King entered. Lyra kept her eyes on the floor as she'd been trained to do, but she could feel the change in the room, the way every wolf straightened and showed their necks in automatic deference to the power that walked among them. Darius Blackthorn was a legend, even among those who had never seen him. The youngest Alpha King in 3 centuries, who had united the fractured packs under a single rule and brought an end to the territory wars that had devastated their kind. He was said to be ruthless, in battle and absolute in judgment, and Lyra felt her heart hammer against her ribs as his footsteps approached the dais where Marcus waited. If you are enjoying this story of power, injustice, and an unexpected twist of fate, please consider hitting the like button and letting me know in the comments what you think will happen next, because this is just the beginning of Lyra's journey from the floor where they forced her to kneel to a throne she never imagined could be hers. Alpha Marcus stepped forward with the oily smile he reserved for those he sought to impress, bowing his head in respect that never quite reached his eyes. "Welcome, Your Majesty, to Shadow Moon territory. We are honored by your presence, and I have taken this opportunity to address a serious matter of pack security and loyalty in front of you, so that you might see how we maintain order and punish those who would betray their own kind." Lyra's stomach turned as Marcus spoke, his voice carrying across the silent hall with practiced authority. She had served in the pack house for years, cleaning, cooking, running errands that no ranked wolf would lower themselves to perform, and she had seen Marcus's private cruelty behind closed doors. He skimmed money, meant for widows and orphans, sold pack resources for personal profit, and blamed his failures on those too weak to fight back. And now he was going to use her to demonstrate his supposed commitment to justice in front of the Alpha King himself. "This woman," Marcus continued, gesturing toward Lyra with theatrical disgust, "has been discovered stealing from our stores and passing information to rogues operating in our territory. She has betrayed the pack that raised her despite her deficiencies, and she must face the consequences of her treachery." The lies fell from his lips with such conviction that Lyra almost wondered if he believed them himself. She had never stolen anything in her life, had never even spoken to a rogue. But the truth did not matter when she had no wolf to prove her innocence through the pack bond, no way to show them what she really was. Marcus had fabricated evidence, she was sure of it, planted whatever he needed to make his case, because that was what he did. He was good at creating narratives that served him, and she was the perfect scapegoat. For the first time since entering the hall, Lyra lifted her eyes from the floor, If she was going to be condemned for crimes she did not commit, if she was going to be punished in front of the most powerful wolf alive, then she would not go down staring at stone. She would meet this false judgment with her head held as high as they would allow, and she would remember that she had survived everything they had done to her so far. Her gaze traveled past Marcus, past the assembled pack members whose faces showed everything from glee to indifference, and landed on the Alpha King himself. And in that moment, everything changed. Darius Blackthorn stood near the dais, his tall frame radiating the kind of power that made other alphas look like children playing at authority, his dark hair falling across a face carved from stone and shadow. But it was his eyes that captured her, silver gray like a winter storm, and as their gazes locked, she saw those eyes widen with an expression she could not name. Shock. Recognition. Something that looked almost like pain, and then she felt it. The snap of connection that she had heard about in whispered stories and romantic tales. The bond that was supposed to be myth and legend and impossible for someone like her. It hit her like lightning, like fire, like falling and flying at the same time. A golden thread that spun itself between her soul and his, binding them together with a certainty that transcended reason. The mate bond. She was feeling the mate bond, which should not exist for a wolfless girl who had nothing to offer anyone. But there it was, singing through her veins, pulling her toward the most dangerous and powerful male in existence, telling her with absolute conviction that he was hers and she was his. And from the way Darius had gone completely still, from the way his hands had clenched into fists at his sides, from the way he stared at her with an intensity that made her skin burn, she knew he felt it too. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, though it could only have been seconds. Marcus continued speaking, oblivious to the shift that had just occurred, detailing her supposed crimes with increasing enthusiasm. The pack members watched with the morbid fascination of those about to witness a punishment, expecting her to be stripped of what little status she had, and likely exiled, or worse. None of them noticed that their king had not moved, had not acknowledged Marcus's words, had not looked away from the kneeling woman whose bound hands trembled, not with fear now, but with the overwhelming force of recognition. Lyra did not know what to do, did not know what this meant, did not know if he would acknowledge what had just happened between them, or if he would ignore it to avoid the complication of being mated to someone so far beneath his station. She had no experience with this, no framework for understanding what came next. Then, Darius moved. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides, his boots echoing on the stone floor. And Marcus finally stopped talking as he registered that something was wrong. The Alpha King stood directly in front of Lyra, looking down at her kneeling form, and when he spoke, his voice carried a command that made every wolf in the room freeze. Release her. Now. The 2 enforcers holding Lyra's shoulders jerked their hands away as if burned, and Darius reached down to snap the ropes binding her wrists with casual strength that spoke of barely restrained fury. He helped her to her feet, with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the rage radiating from him, his hand steady on her elbow until she found her balance, and Lyra stood there in shock as the most powerful alpha alive positioned himself between her and the rest of the room like a shield. Your Majesty, Marcus sputtered, his confident demeanor cracking as he tried to understand what was happening. I must insist that the prisoner remain restrained until judgment has been passed. She is dangerous, and has betrayed the trust of this pack through her actions. Darius turned to face Marcus, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as the full weight of the Alpha King's attention focused on Shadow Moon's leader. The prisoner, Darius said, his voice soft and deadly, is my mate, my true mate, given to me by the moon goddess herself, and you have her bound and kneeling on the floor like a criminal based on accusations that I suspect are as false as your loyalty to your own pack members. A collective gasp rose from the assembled wolves, and Lyra saw shock and disbelief war across dozens of faces. Marcus had gone pale, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to form words. That is impossible, he finally managed. She has no wolf. She cannot be anyone's mate, let alone yours. She is wolfless, broken, and worthless. If you are as shocked as Marcus right now, make sure to subscribe to the channel because this story is about to reveal secrets that will change everything you thought you knew about Lyra and her true nature. Darius smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You know nothing about what she is, Marcus, and your ignorance is about to cost you everything you have built on lies and corruption. As for these accusations of theft and collaboration with rogues, I will be conducting my own investigation, and I suspect I will find that the true criminal stands before me now, projecting his own guilt onto someone powerless to defend herself. He turned back to Lyra, his expression softening in a way that made her chest ache. I am Darius Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, and you are my mate. I claim you before the Moon Goddess, before this pack, and before all witnesses here assembled. Will you accept my claim? Lyra stared at him, her mind racing. Everything in her life had taught her not to trust alphas, not to believe in rescue, not to hope for anything beyond survival. But the mate bond thrummed between them with undeniable truth, and something in his eyes told her that this was real, that he meant every word, that he would stand between her and the world if she let him. Yes, she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse and emotion. I accept. The bond flared golden and bright between them, visible now to every wolf in the room who had the sight to see it. And Darius pulled her against his chest in an embrace that felt like coming home to a place she had never known existed. She could feel his heart beating against her cheek, could smell cedar and smoke and something wild that called to a part of her she had thought was dead. And for the first time in her life, Lyra felt safe. The pack erupted into chaos around them, voices raised in shock and confusion, and in some cases anger. Marcus was shouting something about procedure and propriety, but Darius ignored him completely, his attention focused entirely on the woman in his arms. Are you hurt? He asked quietly, his hand gentle as he examined the rope burns on her wrists. Did they harm you beyond this? Lyra shook her head, too overwhelmed to speak, and Darius nodded before releasing her just enough to turn and face the assembled pack. Let me make myself absolutely clear, Darius announced, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Lyra is under my protection now as my mate and your future queen. Any wolf who speaks against her, who treats her with anything less than the respect she deserves, who dares to threaten or harm her in any way, will answer to me personally. And Marcus, you will remain here while I investigate these accusations you have made, because I have a feeling that what I discover will lead to charges far more serious than theft. Two of the royal guards who had accompanied Darius stepped forward to flank Marcus, and the Shadow Moon Alpha's face twisted with impotent rage. You cannot do this, Marcus protested. I am the Alpha of this territory, and you have no right to interfere in pack discipline. Darius raised an eyebrow. I am the Alpha King, which means I have every right to interfere when I see injustice and corruption. Your actions today have shown me exactly what kind of leader you are, and I suspect your pack members will have much to say once they are free to speak without fear of your retribution. Over the next 3 days, Darius conducted a thorough investigation of Shadow Moon's records and interviewed dozens of pack members, and what he uncovered was worse than Lyra had imagined. Marcus had been embezzling funds for years, skimming from the accounts meant to support orphans and widows, selling pack resources to rogues and rival packs for personal profit, and covering his tracks by blaming missing supplies on Lyra and other low-ranked wolves who had no voice to defend themselves. He had fabricated evidence against her specifically because the Alpha King's visit had made him nervous about his bookkeeping, and he needed a scapegoat to distract from any potential scrutiny. The pack members who had lived under his rule were terrified to speak against him initially, but as word spread that the Alpha King was serious about uncovering the truth, more and more wolves came forward with stories of abuse, theft, and manipulation. Lyra watched from the quarters Darius had given her in the visiting dignitary's wing as Marcus was stripped of his title and removed from Shadow Moon territory in chains. An interim alpha would be appointed until the pack could hold proper elections, and Darius had already begun implementing reforms to ensure that what happened here could not happen in other territories under his rule. But, while justice was being served and Shadow Moon was being restructured, Lyra struggled with her own transformation. The mate bond pulled at her constantly, a living thing that wanted her near Darius every moment, and while he had been nothing but respectful and patient, keeping his distance and giving her time to adjust, she could feel the tension building between them. He wanted her. She could see it in the way his eyes followed her movements, could feel it in the careful way he avoided touching her except when necessary, could sense it in the restraint that cost him more each day. And she wanted him too, which terrified her more than anything Marcus had ever done. Wanting meant vulnerability. Wanting meant giving someone the power to hurt her, to use her, to prove that she was as worthless as everyone had always said. The mate bond insisted that Darius was different, that he would never harm her, that he was safe. But years of abuse had taught her not to trust her own instincts where powerful males were concerned. On the fourth night after he had claimed her, Darius knocked on her door just after sunset. Lyra opened it to find him standing in the hallway with an expression of careful neutrality that did not quite hide his concern. "May I come in?" he asked. "I would like to talk with you about what comes next, and I thought you might be more comfortable here than in a formal setting." She stepped aside to let him enter, and he moved to the window that overlooked the forest, giving her space and keeping his body language non-threatening. "We will be leaving for the capital tomorrow," Darius said quietly. "I have done what I can here, and my presence is needed back home. I want you to come with me, Lyra, not because the bond demands it, not because I am commanding you as your king, but because I want to know you, to give us a chance to build something real, but I will not force you. If you want to stay here or go somewhere else, if you need more time, if you are not ready for any of this, then tell me, and I will make arrangements. You have choices now, and I want you to use them." Lyra studied him in the fading light, this powerful male who had turned her world upside down in a matter of days. He had defended her, avenged her, given her a status she never dreamed of having, and yet he stood before her now offering her freedom instead of demanding her compliance. It was so far from what she expected that she did not know how to process it. "What do you want?" "From me?" she asked, needing to understand. "You are the Alpha King. You could have anyone, someone with a wolf, someone from a powerful family, someone who knows how to be a queen. Why would you want me beyond what the bond forces you to feel?" Darius turned to face her fully, and the raw honesty in his expression took her breath away. "The bond does not force me to feel anything, Lyra. It recognizes what is already true, what my soul knew the moment I saw you. I want you because you are brave. Enough to lift your eyes and meet injustice head-on even when you are kneeling on the floor. I want you because you survived years of cruelty without letting it make you cruel in return. I want you because when I look at you, I see strength that has nothing to do with shifting or pack politics or power. Strength that comes from simply refusing to break no matter what they did to you. And yes, I want you because you are my mate, because everything in me recognizes everything in you. But I want the chance to earn you beyond what the goddess has given us." His words hit her like a physical blow, breaking through defenses she had built over years of protecting herself. No one had ever seen her the way he described, had ever valued the things about her that she thought made her weak. And suddenly she understood that the real risk was not in trusting him, but in letting fear stop her from reaching for the life he was offering. "I will come with you," she said softly. "I am terrified, and I do not know how to be what you need, but I want to try. I want to know you too. Beyond the bond, beyond the titles, I want to see who we could be together." The relief that flooded Darius's face was so profound that Lyra felt answering emotion rise in her own chest, and when he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, she let herself sink into the embrace without reservation. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other, letting the bond settle into something warm and right between them. The journey to the capital took 5 days, and Lyra spent that time learning about the male fate had chosen for her. Darius was nothing like Marcus, or any of the other alphas she had encountered in Shadowmoon. He listened when she spoke, asked her opinions on matters both trivial and important, and never once used his authority to override her wishes or make her feel small. He told her about his own childhood, raised in a pack that valued strength above all else, trained from birth to lead and fight and never show weakness. He had claimed the throne at 21 after his father's death, inheriting a kingdom on the brink of civil war, and he had spent the last 8 years building alliances, enforcing laws that protected the vulnerable, and trying to create a world where power meant responsibility, rather than the right to abuse those beneath you. He was lonely, she realized, surrounded by people who wanted things from him, but rarely saw him as anything more than the authority he represented. But he saw her, truly saw her, and she was beginning to see him too. On the second night of travel, as they sat by the campfire with his guards stationed at a respectful distance, Darius asked her about her childhood, and Lyra found herself telling him things she had never spoken aloud. She described her parents, the vague memories she had of warmth and safety before the rogue attack, the way the pack had treated her after their deaths like an obligation they resented. She told him about the years of servitude, the casual cruelties, the way she had learned to make herself small and invisible to avoid notice, and she told him about the loneliness, the bone-deep ache of being surrounded by people connected through the pack bond while she stood outside that connection, forever apart. Darius listened without interruption, his hand finding hers and holding on like he could anchor her through the memories. And when she finished, his voice was rough with emotion. "You will never be alone again," he promised. "You will never be invisible, never be treated as less than you are, never be made to feel that you do not belong. I swear it to you, Lyra." The capital city of Silvercrest was unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. A sprawling metropolis of stone and steel, where wolves from dozens of territories lived and worked together under the Alpha King's rule. The palace rose from the center of the city like a crown, all soaring towers and ancient walls that had stood for centuries. And as their party approached the main gates, Lyra felt nerves twist in her stomach. These people would be expecting a queen, someone refined and educated and powerful, and instead, they were getting a wolfless girl who had spent most of her life scrubbing floors. Darius seemed to sense her anxiety, because he leaned close as they rode through the gates and whispered, "You are exactly what they need, even if they do not know it yet. Trust me." The palace staff greeted them with practiced efficiency, and Lyra was swept away to quarters that made her Shadowmoon room look like a closet. Servants appeared to help her bathe and dress in clothes finer than anything she had ever touched, and she felt like a fraud playing dress-up in someone else's life. But when Darius came to escort her to dinner with his inner circle, the way his eyes lit up when he saw her made her feel like maybe she could learn to belong here. The dinner was an exercise in controlled chaos as Darius's Beta, Gamma, and lead enforcers tried to reconcile the stories they had heard about their king claiming a mate with the quiet, nervous woman sitting beside him. Lyra could feel them assessing her, trying to understand what Darius saw in someone so unremarkable, and she wanted to sink through the floor. But Darius would not allow her to hide. He introduced her as his mate and future queen, with pride in his voice, deflected questions that made her uncomfortable, and made it clear through word and action that she was to be respected. His beta, a shrewd woman named Kara, seemed to reserve judgment, watching Lyra with sharp eyes that missed nothing. After dinner, as the others dispersed, Kara approached Lyra directly. "I know you must feel overwhelmed," she said without preamble, "and I know you probably think we are all judging you for not being what a queen is supposed to be. But Darius has waited 8 years for his mate, refused every political alliance and advantageous match, and he has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you. So whatever you are, it is exactly what he needs. Give yourself time to find your footing here, and do not let anyone make you feel less than you are. If you have been following Lyra's journey and want to see how she transforms from a servant into a queen, please leave a comment telling me what you think her greatest strength will be as she steps into this new role." The first few weeks in the capital were brutal. Lyra was expected to attend council meetings, host social events, learn the complex politics of ruling multiple territories, and somehow transform herself into someone worthy of standing beside the Alpha King. She was assigned tutors who taught her history, law, diplomacy, and pack dynamics, and she absorbed everything like a sponge, determined not to embarrass Darius or prove his faith in her misplaced. But despite her efforts, whispers followed her everywhere. The wolfless queen, the servant he claimed out of pity, the weak link, who would bring down the kingdom. Some wolves were more subtle in their disdain, but others made no secret of their belief that she was unfit for the role fate had given her. The worst was Lady Helena, the daughter of a powerful alpha from the southern territories who had been pursuing Darius for years. She had expected to be chosen as queen through a political match, and Lyra's sudden appearance had destroyed those plans. Helena was beautiful and accomplished, with a strong wolf and all the training Lyra lacked, and she never missed an opportunity to highlight the contrast. At a formal reception 3 weeks after Lyra's arrival, Helena approached her with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "My dear, I simply must commend you on your bravery," she said loudly enough for nearby wolves to hear. "It takes such courage to step into a role you are so clearly unprepared for. If you ever need advice on proper protocols or managing your image, do feel free to ask. I would hate to see you continue embarrassing yourself and, by extension, our king." Lyra felt heat rise to her cheeks as other wolves turned to watch the exchange, but before she could respond, Darius appeared at her side. "Lady Helena," he said coolly, "I appreciate your concern, but my mate has no need of your advice. She is learning quickly and impressing me daily with her intelligence and grace. Perhaps you should focus on your own behavior rather than offering unsolicited criticism to your future queen." Helena paled and retreated. But the damage was done. Lyra could feel the judgment in the room, the speculation about whether Darius was defending her out of obligation or genuine respect. That night, alone in her quarters, she allowed herself to cry for the first time since arriving in Silvercrest. She was trying so hard, working longer hours than anyone knew, but it never seemed to be enough. She would always be the wolfless girl pretending to be something she was not. Darius found her there an hour later, sitting on the floor with tears streaming down her face, and he did not ask permission before pulling her into his arms. "Talk to me," he said gently. "Tell me what you need." "I cannot do this," Lyra whispered. "I am not strong enough. Not smart enough. Not enough, period. They are right, Darius. You deserve better than me. Someone who actually knows how to be a queen. Someone with a wolf who can stand beside you as an equal. I am just going to keep failing you." Darius pulled back enough to look into her eyes, and the intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. "You are not failing me, Lyra. You are exceeding every expectation I had, and most that I did not even know I should have. You walk into rooms full of wolves who look down on you, and you hold your head high anyway. You learn things in weeks that take others years to master. You care about our people, genuinely care, in a way that no politically motivated queen ever would. Do you know what I see when I look at you? I see the strongest person I have ever known, and I am in awe of you." His words broke something open in her chest, and Lyra found herself kissing him before she could think better of it. The mate bond roared to life between them, and Darius responded with a hunger that had been building since the moment they met. They made love that night, with a desperate intensity that left them both shaking, and Lyra finally understood what it meant to be truly seen and wanted and cherished. In the aftermath, wrapped in Darius's arms with his hand stroking her hair, she felt a strange stirring deep inside her, something waking up after a lifetime of sleep. "Darius," she whispered, "something is happening. I feel strange, like something inside me is shifting." He sat up immediately, his alpha instincts alert to any threat, but what he saw in her face made him freeze. "Your eyes," he breathed. "Lyra, your eyes are glowing silver." The change happened fast after that. Power flooded through Lyra's body, ancient and vast and utterly foreign, and she gasped as she felt her wolf rise for the first time. But this was not a normal wolf. This was something far older, connected to magic that predated the packs themselves. She shifted without conscious thought, and where she expected to find a small or weak wolf, she found a creature of pure silver that radiated power. Darius stared at her in shock, and when she shifted back, he was already reaching for the ancient texts he kept in his study. "I need to confirm something," he said, his voice shaking with excitement and disbelief. "Lyra, I think you are moonborn. The last of a bloodline everyone thought was extinct. Your wolf stayed dormant until you found your true mate, just as the old legend said. And now that she has awakened, you are going to be more powerful than anyone in this kingdom, including me." The revelation changed everything. Within days, word had spread through the capital, and beyond that, the new queen was moonborn, blessed directly by the moon goddess, and the whispers turned from contempt to awe. Lyra's wolf brought gifts beyond strength and speed. She could heal with a touch, could sense lies and truth through the bond she was now forming with the pack, could calm conflicts and strengthen alliances through the power that radiated from her. She was everything the kingdom needed, a queen who could unite and protect in ways no alpha ever could, and Darius watched her grow into her power with pride that made her heart ache. But with the power came new dangers. There were wolves who saw her as a threat to the old order, who wanted the kingdoms to remain fractured and weak so they could exploit the chaos. And there were ancient enemies who had thought the moonborn line destroyed, who would stop at nothing to finish what they had started centuries ago. 6 months after Lyra arrived in Silvercrest, an assassination attempt nearly succeeded. She survived only because her moonborn instincts warned her seconds before the attack, giving her time to shield herself and Darius from the poisoned blade. The assassin was caught and interrogated, and what he revealed shook the kingdom to its foundations. There was a conspiracy among certain alpha families to destabilize Darius's rule and return to the old ways of constant warfare and territorial disputes. They had been working in secret for years, and Marcus's corruption in Shadowmoon was just one small piece of a much larger plan. Lyra had disrupted everything by being claimed as Darius's mate, and now they wanted her dead before she could fully come into her power and cement his rule permanently. Darius wanted to lock her away somewhere safe until the threat was eliminated, but Lyra refused. "I am not the frightened girl you found kneeling on the floor anymore," she told him. "I am moonborn, I am your mate, and I am their queen. I will not hide while others fight battles that are mine to face." So they faced the conspiracy together, rooting out the traitors with Lyra's truth-sensing abilities and Darius's strategic brilliance. It took months of careful investigation and even more careful politics, but one by one, the wolves who had plotted against them were exposed and dealt with. Some were exiled, others imprisoned, and a few were executed for treason after trials that proved their guilt beyond doubt. Through it all, Lyra learned to wield her power and her position with increasing confidence. No longer the uncertain girl, but a queen in truth. The final confrontation came on the winter solstice, when the last of the conspiracy attempted a coup during the annual gathering of all the territories. They had planned to kill both Darius and Lyra during the ceremonial hunt, making it look like a tragic accident, and then install a puppet king who would do their bidding. But Lyra felt their intentions through the pack bond she had been strengthening, and she and Darius turned the trap back on the traitors. The battle was brief, but brutal, and when it was over, the threat was finally ended. Lyra stood in the center of the gathered wolves, her silver wolf blazing with power, and proclaimed that any who sought to harm the peace Darius had built would face her judgment. No one doubted her, and no one questioned her right to stand beside their king ever again. In the aftermath, as they worked to heal the divisions the conspiracy had created and rebuild trust among the territories, Lyra discovered she was pregnant. The news brought joy that eclipsed even the relief of surviving the attempts on their lives, and Darius was so overwhelmed, he actually cried when she told him. They would have a child, an heir who would be both alpha and moonborn, who would carry forward everything they were building together. The pregnancy was not easy, complicated by Lyra's unique heritage, but she was determined to see it through. And 8 months later, she gave birth to a daughter with her silver eyes and Darius's dark hair, a perfect blend of their bloodlines who radiated power from her first breath. They named her Selene, after the ancient moon goddess, and she became the hope of the kingdom. Lyra watched her daughter grow with wonder. This child who would never know the pain of being unwanted or the fear of being powerless. Selene would be raised to lead with compassion and strength, to value every member of the pack, regardless of their rank, to understand that true power came from lifting others up rather than keeping them down. And she would know, always, that her mother had been forced to kneel before a pack and had risen to become their queen, that strength came in many forms, and that the bonds of love and loyalty were worth fighting for. Make sure you are subscribed, because the epilogue is going to show you just how far Lyra has come and what the future holds for the Moonborn Queen and her family. Epilogue: 5 years after Darius claimed Lyra before the Shadow Moon Pack, the capital hosted the largest gathering of territories in living memory. Alphas and their families came from every corner of the kingdom to celebrate the anniversary of the reforms that had transformed their world. Lyra stood on the palace balcony watching the crowds below, her hand resting on her rounded belly where their second child grew, and marveled at how much had changed. The laws she and Darius had implemented protected the vulnerable, gave voice to the voiceless, and ensured that what had happened to her in Shadow Moon could never happen again. Orphans were guaranteed care and education, widows received support and respect, and wolves without traditional power were valued for their contributions rather than dismissed as worthless. Selene raced across the balcony chasing butterflies, her silver eyes bright with laughter, and Lyra smiled as Darius scooped their daughter up and spun her around. This was the life she never imagined she could have, full of love and purpose, and the kind of bone-deep happiness that came from being exactly where she belonged. She had gone from being the wolfless girl forced to kneel to becoming the Moonborn Queen who had helped unite a fractured kingdom. And she had done it not by becoming someone else, but by embracing exactly who she was. Kara appeared at her elbow with reports that needed review, and Helena, who had eventually apologized and asked to serve the crown after her own father was exposed as part of the conspiracy, waited nearby with updates on the southern territories. Darius joined her as the sun set over Silvercrest. Their daughter balanced on his hip and pressed a kiss to Lyra's temple. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly, the question he posed at least once a week as if he needed reassurance that this was real. Lyra turned to look at him. This male who had seen her at her lowest and loved her anyway, who had given her power and position, but more importantly had given her partnership and respect, who had proven every single day that he chose her. Not because fate demanded it, but because she was exactly who he wanted. "I am happy," she said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "I am exactly where I am supposed to be." And as the stars emerged overhead and the city celebrated below, Lyra held her family close and thought about the girl who had knelt on a cold stone floor and met the eyes of a king. That girl had been afraid and hurt and convinced she had no value, but she had survived. She had risen, and she had become proof that even in the darkest moments, even when forced to your knees by those who should protect you, you could still find the strength to claim the life you deserved. Thank you so much for joining me on Lyra's incredible journey from the floor to the throne. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button, leave a comment sharing your favorite moment, and subscribe for more supernatural romance stories where love conquers all and the underdog becomes the hero. Until next time, remember that your worth is not determined by those who cannot see it, and your happy ending is waiting just beyond the moment you refuse to give up.